We're hearing more and more about sustainable investing, and some believe that we, as an investment community, may be forced to have some of our lifetime investments in renewables and companies that glide into this idea that the global community must move into sustainable areas of our lifestyles. George Bennett is Chief Executive of Rainbow Rare Earths, which believes it's in the part of the mining sector which will be able to contribute to this type of sustainable lifestyle. George, welcome. It's good to be able to catch up with you again from South Africa. We'll talk a little bit about the project and what's happening in just a minute, but I want to pick up on this point. In the wake of COP26, it certainly seems to me, as someone who invests in the markets, that I'm being encouraged to look at ways in which I can contribute to this idea that as a world that we are moving into this sustainable and renewable area. And I know that at Rainbow Rare Earths, you say you fit very neatly into this idea of supporting that sort of outlook.
Thanks once again for having me, and you're 100%, Jeremy. This is a very key area of investment going forward for lots of funds, especially ESG-focused funds. So what we're seeing is that after the COP26 targets were announced, is that to achieve any of these targets that the governments are trying to set, one's going to require far more wind turbine power to be generated, far more solar power, and of course, far more electric vehicles. And all the electric vehicle manufacturers globally, certainly all the major manufacturers, have all set targets for zero emissions. And that means that by starting with some companies setting 2030 as their targets, they will not be selling any internal combustion engine motor vehicles, certainly in Europe and Western economies like the North America and Canada as well. So to achieve these targets, all these electric vehicles and all these wind turbines require a large amount of rare earth elements in them. And rare earth elements don't only go into these two key areas, but we see rare earth elements in consumer electronics in the form of cell phones, and in the form of drones, electric motorbikes, electric scooters. They all require permanent magnets. And permanent magnets, two key elements are neodymium and praseodymium, which are two of the rare earth elements that we will be mining, or we mine in Burundi, and we will be mining or producing in South Africa, not mining, but producing in South Africa. So neodymium and praseodymium are key, and you'll see all rare earth projects talk about these two key elements because they go into permanent magnets.
Just to quickly get a little bit more of a handle on the understanding, because we're going to be talking more and more about this, as I said, about an investment community and what it is you're doing. You're deep down in the sector. You're naming two elements there that we as investors may have heard of before, but quite frankly don't really engage with at a one-to-one level. All we know is, as you say it, you provide the elements of giving us what we want in the end, and that is something that is renewable and recyclable and sustainable. Just to quickly outline exactly what it is you're doing here. And my understanding is that rare earths pretty much appear around the globe. I mean, if you go into someone's back garden, if you're lucky and you do the right sort of testing, the chances are you're going to come up with some sort of exposure to rare earths. What is it about the areas you're targeting here? And correct me if I'm wrong, but is it possible to mine rare earths pretty much anywhere in the world?
No, that's a misconception. So rare earths, as you say, are quite common. They are not technically rare. But rare earths are made up of 17 elements on the periodic table. Things like, as I said, neodymium, terbium, dysprosium, praseodymium, scandium, and thorium, uranium. These are all rare earth elements. But unfortunately, they are not found in economic quantities around the world. So there are very few rare earth deposits that can be mined economically, and that can be mined from the sense that the mineralogy and metallurgy of rare earth deposits tends, on average, to be quite complicated. And they are often beset with high levels of radioactive elements called uranium and thorium. At Rainbow Rare Earths, both our rare earth projects that we have are very, very low with these two key elements, which makes our two projects very, very environmentally friendly from a production point of view.
Okay, let's take a look at the two projects that are underway at Rainbow Rare Earths, because clearly it's, I think, important for us to understand what the company is doing and where it's doing it and what you're likely to produce in the future. Just outline the projects you've got.
Yeah. So at the moment, we have a project in Burundi where we are trial mining and producing a rare earth concentrate, one of the highest grade concentrates in the world, and with a very large percentage of neodymium and praseodymium in that rare earth basket. We have all 17 elements, but neodymium and praseodymium make up about 90% of the value of that basket that we produce in Burundi. And that rare earth concentrate has to be shipped to China for further downstream processing. The Chinese control about 95% of the downstream processing around the world. They control about 80% of mine production, but about 95% of downstream processing. So even Mountain Pass in America, they produce a rare earth concentrate similar to what we do in Burundi. That all gets shipped to China at the moment for downstream processing. So that is what the whole world is talking about, is trying to move away from having sole reliance on China and having a sustainable rare earth value chain outside of China. Now, in Phalaborwa, we have an asset there which is 38 million tons of gypsum residue from a phosphoric acid production process in South Africa over a 50-year period. And that phosphoric acid production process produced a gypsum residue with rare earth elements sitting in a cracked chemical form. So because it's in a cracked chemical form already, we're already able to go downstream at Phalaborwa further than what we're doing in Burundi, which is to produce a mixed rare earth carbonate. And we're now going one step further to produce separated rare earth oxides, which is a further step downstream. And there are not many rare earth projects in the world that can go all the way down to, at this stage, to separated rare earth oxides. But we're able to do it at Phalaborwa because of the unique nature of the cracked chemical stacks that we have at Phalaborwa. So we're already 2/3 of the way downstream when we start our process at Phalaborwa, which enables us to get to a low capital intensity and a low operating cost project in Phalaborwa.
Does that mean you've got the money on the balance sheet to pay for this, if this is low capital expenditure?
No, we have raised money recently to take us all the way through to a bankable feasibility study at Phalaborwa. And on conclusion of the bankable study, we will need to come to the market for a combination of debt and equity to build the project.
How easy is it in this environment to raise money? Sometimes small cap companies, I think you're 80 to 83 million pound market cap at the moment. Sometimes small cap companies do find it difficult to engage with the city in order to raise money. With this area, which, as you say, has been raised in terms of its appeal, does it make your life a lot easier in terms of engaging with investment bankers?
It does make our life easier. There's lots of interest in the rare earth market at the moment, especially in projects that have got a real chance of success, which we believe we have. As I said, we've got a very experienced technical team with a fair amount of rare earth experience on board, and we do believe that we will be at a far higher share price than we are now once we've released our initial feasibility study, which is due next quarter, at the end of next quarter, and then our bankable study, which we're targeting for the end of 2022. And on the back of the bankable study, we believe we'll be easily able to raise the necessary debt as well as equity funding for the project.
Okay, well, let me bring up a share price chart just to remind ourselves as to where we are. I said it's about 80 odd million pound market cap, 15.75 pence is where we are there at the moment. You can see actually, if anything, you've got presumably your first price target will be something like around about 20 pence we saw earlier this year. What is the project worth, do you think, in total? Because you now know more about the capacity or the long life of this mine and what you're able to provide. I mean, prices, we don't know where prices are going to be. Sorry?
So you're right. Our key project is the Phalaborwa project in South Africa, which at current rare earth prices, we anticipate will generate revenue of about $220 to $250 million per annum. So that's our key focus. It's a significant project, and we would expect an EBITDA margin of about 50% on that project. So we anticipate this to be a very, very good project from an IRR point of view, as well as a discounted cash flow point of view in terms of valuation.
So one final question then, George, going back to the beginning, talking about the sustainability, the renewables and the general investment environment as we see things moving out from this point. Just remind us then how these two projects fit in.
Well, as I mentioned before, and from an ESG point of view, the project in Burundi is very low levels of uranium and thorium. We shipped this to China successfully on the high seas. So it's got very good credits from an ESG point of view. And very importantly, at Phalaborwa, our key focus and our main project is that these two gypsum stacks, we will be reprocessing them. We'll be tidying up the acid water that's associated with these gypsum stacks, neutralizing it, and using it in our Phalaborwa project in a closed circuit So, and we'll be redepositing a clean benign gypsum on a new stack site that's lined to RFC standards and Equator Principle standards. So we are doing an environmental cleanup at Palabora, which I think is a very, very key point from ESG investors to understand.
Okay, look, George, thanks so much indeed for your time. We'll catch up with you again, hopefully, when you get a bit more news under your belt in terms of the progress you're making towards the projects that you've got there at the company. But it's interesting to talk to you. Thanks indeed there for joining us. That's George Bennett, Chief Executive of Rainbow Rare Earths. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.